Hi, I'm Lauren Crawford. Welcome. Today we're going to be talking about a fascinating topic, which is about a reinvention imperative that's required for men in midlife, who I would argue need more of an evolution, not to be thinking about retirement per se. Last week I had the opportunity to participate in a training with Lee Harris, who is an intuitive and a channeler. He had a wonderful course called Next Level Healer. For me, it was an opportunity to look at things in a new and different way. And really, it left me with more questions than it answered. But this is, I think, important for us because it challenges us to look at where we're at now and where we can be, in my case, where I can be. So I'd like to pose a question. What if instead of winding down, this is actually a time for us to expand? We're going to explore that today. What might be involved in expanding? I'll be covering a few points that will be useful for your expansion. And these include energy practices, mindset shifts, community, and repurposing skills. So if this is something that interests you, go ahead and like, subscribe, comment, and share. Let's dive in. Before we talk about expansion, I'd like to just spend a little bit of time exploring the current paradigm that we have around midlife. So oftentimes in midlife, we find ourselves looking forward to contemplating retirement. And it's my intent to disabuse us of this way of thinking because retirement in its current paradigm or where it comes from is fundamentally flawed and it's an outdated concept. I want to explore why that is. If we look at the history of retirement, it really started in the late 19th century in Germany. They introduced this notion of retiring at the age of 70, which was later reduced to the age of 65. Canada, for example, introduced an old age security system in 1927, and it was a means-tested system, so some people would be able to get these government funds at the age of 70. The US, for example, introduced its old age security system in 1935, and it was geared to folks at 65. And if you think about that, the interesting paradox is life expectancy was only 62. Now we live well into our 90s, some of us. My mom just celebrated her 89th birthday, for example. That's a third of our life from 65 to 90. Another thing that happened is post-World War II, a lot of the corporate world embarked on creating company pensions. And this usually included a 30 or 35-year employment commitment after which you would receive pensions. Now, a lot of those no longer exist, and we still have, in most countries, some kind of public pension system and regime, or some kind of co-funding of retirement. But if you look at this model of 30 years in and then out, it really doesn't stand the test either because again, we have a third of our lives left after that working period. And here's what research shows us. Harvard has the longest longitudinal study, and it shows how active living is really the way to go and to have healthier lives. So since the 90s, the numbers choosing to stay in the workforce have increased considerably, up to a point of 20% of people are continuing to stay in the workforce post 65. And yes, there may be some financial imperative there because of the inequities of wealth in our system. And this applies to both the US and Canada. So Canada is seeing the same patterns of people staying in the workforce. And it's expected that this number will grow to 25% by 2030. Many studies also show that the connection between retirement and depression and physical illness is up to 40% and 60% respectively. So illness and depression increase post-retirement. So we don't want to be spending a third of our lives in that thing we call retirement when it's having these kind of implications, I would argue. Yale University research showed also that when there are positive perceptions to aging, that can add 7.9 years to your life. So again, just our attitude around aging, not buying into this paradigm that's out there. Research on the blue zones shows that when folks engage actively and consistently up into their 90s, they remain healthy and vital parts of the community. And here's another factor that I think is really fascinating. 25% of new businesses are started by people who are in that 56 to 64 age group, so in that midlife chunk. This is fascinating. And there are some great examples of who has been successful in this. Jaswant Kulmar created Jaswant's Kitchen Indian Spices blend when she was in her 60s. Halland David Saunders, better known as Colonel Sanders, created Kentucky Fried Chicken at the age of 62. He created his first franchise. Ray Kroc created McDonald's at 52. Arianna Huffington launched Huffington Post when she was in her 60s as well. Bernie Marcus established Home Depot when he was in his 50s. So there's lots of us who are doing interesting and creative things in midlife. It doesn't have to be the beginning of the decline. I work with clients and help them to see that bigger version of themselves as they're moving through midlife so that they can be sort of future forward looking, not seeing the future as the beginning of the decline. And we're going to have more on that in a little bit. Right now, though, I'd like to transition into looking at the energy imperative of this stage of life. One of the first shifts we have to make in reinventing this whole midlife paradigm and how we view midlife is how we connect with our energy. We are simply energy beings. Everything about us is energy. And we can, and I would argue must, manage our energy better than we have perhaps in the past. I would also argue that midlife transformation begins with energy management. Why? How we manage and use our energy can prevent or delay physical and mental decline. As energy beings, we need to appreciate how to work with and optimize our energy on all levels as we age. The old system of going to the gym and pushing ourselves hard and going out for the 5-mile run, well, heck, that may work for some people in midlife and beyond, but certainly not for the majority. Rather, I'd suggest it's a combination of breath work, mental fitness, and things like walking that are going to keep us in balance along the way. How we've used energy and established patterns of its use in the first half of life aren't necessarily going to work in the second half of life. They'll actually be depleting. Regular exercise that we were once doing may have waned off, and so it's not so much part of what we're doing now. And even if we are doing it, it needs to be modified to meet our needs, not the needs of a 30 or 40-year-old. If we continue to eat the same volume and quantity of foods that we always did in those earlier years, that's going to have an implication too. We need to refine our diets in such a way that there's better quality foods and perhaps less quantity of food. We get comfortable and the creature comforts become the norm. That will often look like weight gain and a more sedentary lifestyle for many of us. Not all, but many of us. There can also be anxious tendencies that come in this time of life. The nervous system has been dysregulated for a while. And even on a subtle level, as we age, we're moving into a stage of life that's lighter. It's a lighter energy. In Ayurveda, we call this Vata dosha. And that needs to be regulated along with managing the stress that is an integral part of modern day living. All of this can lead to health issues in midlife, which can look like hypertension, which can look like heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and even strokes. This is why energy management is really, really crucial. I'd like to show you something very, very simple. If you recall, your parents or your grandparents, in my case, used to always say, just slow down and take some deep breaths. This is actually deep intuitive wisdom. I'd like you to try right now just some deeper breathing. And it's always a great idea to close your eyes when you're doing this. When we close our eyes, we disconnect 80% of the distractions and activity of the mind. If you'd like, close your eyes or simply look down, cast your gaze down, and start to inhale and exhale a little bit more deeply. In the yoga world, we do this exclusively through the nose, but if you want to exhale through the mouth, you're welcome to do that. So just inhale and exhale more slowly. Nice, slow, steady inhalation, nice, slow, steady exhalation. And if you're not used to breathing this way, just take your time. Feel that expansion of the chest, that expansion maybe drawing deeper towards the abdomen, and then the exhalation is smooth and steady. If you notice yourself tensing up, just remain relaxed and calm. Just a few more rounds. These are deep, rich, fuller, concentrated breath, methodical breaths. Nice. And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes and just notice how you feel. Notice what's different. There's a powerful effect here when we slow down the breathing on the autonomic nervous system. So the parasympathetic nervous system gets kicked in, and this is the rest, heal, digest part of the nervous system that many of us need to be more plugged into. And let's be clear, there's a lot of different breath techniques that we can explore. I just wanted to demonstrate to you the most simple. But other things that we can look at in terms of energy management in midlife and beyond, the practices like Tai Chi, Qigong, and my expertise in yoga. I've just explored Tai Chi for the first time over the last few weeks, and am fascinated by the deep, slow, methodical breathing that accompanies it. And then the other thing we can do is look at energy awareness exercises. So one of the things that I like to do when I start a yoga class, or even working with clients, is just to close our eyes, feel the physical body, and then we start to notice the sensations of the subtle body. Rather than doing that, I'm going to invite you just to bring your palms together and rub them and create some heat. And you can press them with some good force and rub them quickly, and you're going to notice that heat building right away. And if you just continue here for a few more breaths, you'll feel that heat in your palms. And then just allow them to float away from each other, just a few inches, closing your eyes even. And most of you are going to feel some energetic pull there, like a magnet, a magnetized effect. If you gently float them away a little bit more, you'll feel that pull of the magnet. Push them together, it'll feel like a pressure's built. And if you're not feeling that, you can rub again and keep trying for a few more rounds. But what that shows us is how there's energy, prana, life force, whatever you want to call it, that we get to play with. And so if we are building some of this awareness into midlife and beyond, we are a powerful force. We can actually start to learn to work with our bodies in a much more sophisticated way. The clients I work with are always powerfully impacted by how this subtle work with breaths can have such a profound impact on their lives. Usually it starts with being more clear, clarity of mind. But then they start to notice other things too. There's a calmness that starts to be more prevalent in their lives. They can start to sleep better. They can start to feel more balanced. And even things like habits that are maybe not the most helpful, snacking and these kinds of things, maybe imbibing a wee bit more, they will start to actually dissipate over time. All right, let's shift gears a little bit to another aspect of this reinvention imperative that I'm talking about, which is the examination of cultural norms around midlife. So what's out there? What do we hear? What do we learn? What do we digest about midlife? Well, the cultural narratives are pretty limiting in terms of their vision of what midlife is about. First, there's this classic midlife crisis kind of narrative. And it's very much a pathologizing of the period. It's reactionary. It's driven by fear rather than growth. This complex psychological shift that we're undergoing in midlife gets reduced to some superficial consumption thing. So you'll see the examples of someone buying the expensive sports car, or moving into the fancy new house, or uprooting and leaving a job and doing something entirely different. Maybe even leaving their family and going off and creating some other kind of thing. The real focus here is on recapturing youth and this idea that, oh my gosh, I'm losing my youth. What am I going to do? And there's this panic that takes it over, and that's a bit of the crisis that occurs. Another narrative is really the peak performance of youth narrative, which says, frankly, if you haven't achieved something by 50, too bad, so sad, it's over. And this is just absolute craziness, because it ignores the fact that our creativity in terms of our thinking, our emotional regulation, and our wisdom increases with age. So we're going to be doing actually more wonderful and creative concepts and ideas post 50. It also creates this artificial timeline that leaves men feeling like they're behind. They can feel bad about themselves and about some of the choices that they've made, or maybe where they're at right now in their life in terms of what they've achieved, because they fail to embrace a growth imperative and get into this idea of, oh my gosh, I'm past 50, what am I going to do? What they need to recognize is they can do whatever they want, but they just haven't figured that out yet. The other narrative that's out there is that at this stage in midlife, It's all a gradual decline from here. So it really frames the second half as a period of managing the decline. Our bodies, our inputs, and our overall value are considered to be in decline. It normalizes or makes appropriate the idea of disengagement from challenges and from learning. That's for the younger guys. I've done my time. It's time to kick back and enjoy the fruits of my labor. The emphasis here is really on preparation for the end rather than exploration of the next stage and being excited about the next stage. We can conceptualize reinventing midlife by looking at what some of the writers are saying, and these are men much smarter than me on the topic. There's a growing body of evidence in literature that supports this idea of changing the narrative on midlife. So Richard Rohr is one of my favorites, and he has this concept of falling upward in the second half. And what that means is really the first half of life, as he says, is really building the container for life. And the second half of life is giving us an opportunity to explore its contents. So the stuff that's the surface or the superficial, if you will, is created. And then in midlife, we get to explore the rich tapestry of what's in there. What's it all about? Midlife challenges and failures become the foundational work for deeper wisdom and more authentic living, according to Rohr. And this midlife transition and its challenges, they actually present an initiation into greater wholeness. How beautiful is that? Chip Conley is another fellow who's written about the concept of the modern elder, and that's how he's framing midlife. And in his work, he sees guys in their late 30s all the way into their 70s who are considering that midlife. So this big expansion of that demographic. The modern elder, with this notion of the modern elder, wisdom and curiosity create unique value. It's about rewiring, not retiring. So this idea of repurposing our knowledge and skills and passions rather than disengaging. And Joseph Campbell had also written on the topic of midlife, and he saw it more so as the hero's second journey. So the first hero journey is that journey into manhood. Who am I? Who am I becoming? The hero's journey now is of different challenges and rewards than that first hero's journey. And it's less now about personal fulfillment and more about bringing this wisdom back to the benefit of community. So this idea of a bigger sense of who and what we are becoming. Midlife, therefore, can be a process of initiation, a changing, a shifting into. Who are we becoming? I'd like you to explore a little bit of this by way of a guided visualization. So go ahead and close your eyes again if you're comfortable. I'm going to be giving you a few prompts here over the next couple of minutes. So just settle in. So again, you can start with a few deeper breaths. Just get embodied, feel your body, feel present. Settle in. And feel your feet on the floor. Feel your seat firmly planted in your chair. Let the breath resume its natural flow and just pay attention to the inflow and outflow of breath through your nostrils. Your mind is busy, just bring it back to the task at hand. And now, for some reflection time, based on where you're at with your career, your family, and your interests, notice where you're at now. What does that all look like? And then consider where you might want them to be, how you might want those things to shift or change. What might that look like? Is there more that you would like to explore? And if you're totally content with the current path, that's great. If you want to make some minor tweaks, Or maybe it's time to explore something entirely new. Just consider. And at this stage, without worrying about the practicalities or rationalizing, just take a moment to dream about what you may want to see changed, how you could grow and shift, what the next version of yourself might look like. Try not to edit or restrict or get into that place of rationalizing. Just dream big. Go for it. And if you're struggling a bit, well, consider maybe perhaps what people recognize you as being good at or that you have aptitude for. And ideally, that's something that you enjoy. So for example, people often tell me that I have the capacity to make them feel calm, to help them to feel calm. Can you see yourself engaging in new and different ways of being that maybe bring more joy to your life? Don't be shy about exploring what might bring you more joy. Please do. And don't allow yourself to be constrained by the commitments you have to others at this point. This is just an exploration for you. Be free to be you and who you'd love to become. So maybe think about where you are, who you would be with. What are the sounds, the landscapes, the textures, the smells and the tastes of where you are? What does it feel like? And then just take a moment to consider how becoming this version of yourself would benefit you. How would becoming this version of yourself benefit you? And when you're ready, you can come back. And if it feels appropriate, pause the video and take a moment to jot down some of the things that came up for you. It can be very, very helpful. Shifting gears again to the next section we want to talk about, and this is about community. So an integral part of reinventing midlife is our connection with others. The US Surgeon General has recently declared loneliness as an epidemic in 2023, I believe it was. And the statistics show that this loneliness epidemic increases mortality by 25%. That's the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So being alone and isolated has a profound impact on us. Men over 45 are vulnerable. 25% of men in this age group say they don't even have a single close friend. And it's not easy to make friends in this stage of life, which can have implications on health and morbidity consequences. Again, it's powerful stuff. So research on friendship and longevity shows that men with closer friends have lower cognitive decline, have fewer cases of depression and anxiety, and have better health overall. We have these cultural messages to men about being self-reliant, and this results in a lack of vulnerability, one of the requirements of making new friends. Men make most of their friends through their work, so when they retire, we see a 40% decline in male friendships post-retirement. Part of what we want to think about here in midlife is this idea of being witnessed in your transformation by others and with others. So having a peer group can be really, really helpful because we're going through a lot in this stage. So having that mirroring can be very, very comforting, and that's going to benefit, as the statistics have just shown, on a number of levels, cognitive and health levels, and overall quality of life levels. So we can model what men's community and support looks like, and try to be more proactive about this as if this is something that you're in need of. For example, you could join my Midlife Men's Wisdom Circle, a private Facebook group, joining a group of midlife men who are building together a community. The link for that is below in the description. Let's explore now repurposing. So this is an interesting concept, and the Chip Conley reference above referred to it as well. If we have a framework for identifying all of our accumulated wisdom, skills, and experiences, that can be very, very helpful. And so this framework can include things like knowledge capital. So what is it that you know? What are the knowledge that you've accrued throughout your working life and your life in general? What is your network capital? So this is the who you know kind of stuff, how you've been plugged in. And this may be through work connections, it may be through community connections and that sort of thing. So you do have network capital that you've built through your life. Character capital. So who are you? What accolades and recognition do you receive? I just asked about, what things do people comment on in that contemplation around what you're good at. So these kinds of things are your character capital. What are you known for? And then there's the skill capital. So this is what you can do. So what are some of the skills? And remember, with skills, there's soft skills and hard skills. A soft skill could be that you're a really good listener. You're able to sort of sit and hold space for people. That's a very soft skill, and not one that everyone has. Whereas hard skills might be, I'm really good with my hands. I can do these things. I'm really good with numbers. I can do, spreadsheets, that kind of stuff. So skills capital. And then the last one on the list is purpose capital. So this is the idea of really knowing what matters to you. I'd like you to think about purpose at this stage, especially as including legacies. What is it that I want to be connected to for the rest of my days that are going to leave an imprint? And a lot of us think of legacy in terms of leaving something to the family, but what if it's bigger than that? What if it's something that has an imprint? And it starts now, not posthumously. So it's this idea of how do I build a living legacy? And that can be really, really inspiring. So these are the elements of a framework. And then how you can use this is creating your own reinvention inventory. And I've got a worksheet that you'll find in the description below that you can explore. And with this, you can create in concrete terms an inventory of what you'll bring to your reinvention, to who you're becoming, should you choose to have one, that is. This worksheet is helpful because when you put things on paper, you can concretize and make more sense of where you might want to go. I welcome you to explore that. Many clients that I work with actually struggle with giving themselves license to explore things in a more fulsome way. It's like somehow we've been conditioned to think within this small parameter, a box that we've created for ourselves, and that box may no longer even be working. But the brave ones who do reinvent are the ones who find fulfillment in the truest sense of the word. No longer are they yearning for that something meaningful, they're living it. They freed themselves from the shackles of the material world and all of its trappings so that they can live with the greater freedom of spirit and live with purpose. This doesn't mean you're letting go of all of the stuff that you've worked for. It just means it takes a different priority moving forward. My experience of leaving a painful and seeking fulfillment in new ways continues to unfold as I grow and learn more about myself, as I step into this new and better version of myself. It's really a journey of understanding how to be in ease and flow, whereas so much of our lives into midlife have been about the pressures to achieve and to grow. And there's nothing wrong with that. But there's a shift now in perspective, and there's a deeper inner calling for something more. And we can integrate our past achievements in whatever this future aspiration is going to look like, but we're using them in more creative ways and ways that align more with our shifting and evolving values. So just to sum up, We explored some of the myths around retirement and how it may not be cracked up to all it's meant to be. So this idea of remaining engaged, of seeing aging as an opportunity, not the declining years, connecting with others rather than isolating. We examined how managing our energy bodies can better equip us to make a midlife journey that's much more rewarding. We looked at shifting our mindset around this stage of life, including exploration of what some of the thought leaders are sharing with us. We discussed how community is essential for our midlife and beyond, both in terms of our mental, emotional, and physical well-being. And finally, we looked at how repurposing knowledge, wisdom, experience, and skills to shape new possibilities in new ways that we've not even considered yet. I invite you to continue to explore this topic of reinvention of midlife, both on your own and by following me and others who are addressing this topic. Use the Reinvention inventory document to start doing some of this work now, that deeper examination. And you can reach out to me directly if you want to explore where you're at and how to move forward. You deserve this. By repurposing myself, I'm in this wonderful place of being able to connect with men who are from really all walks of life and coach them as they navigate through this midlife crossroads. It's truly a gift to be able to do this work, and it wasn't something that I conceptualized even a few years ago. So don't be scared to think big. Get out of that small box that you might have put yourself in, because really the future is yours. I hope that you've enjoyed this discussion, and if so, please go ahead and you can subscribe, you can comment and share. I look forward to seeing you next time. And again, don't forget about those links in the description below.